Hello again and welcome to another episode of the Franchise Everything podcast, where we talk about everything and anything in franchising. And this morning you might be able to hear from the background noise. We're at the Franchising and Business Opportunities Expo in Melbourne. And I'm joined in this special episode by Jan Timms, who is the author of... Trying to get in the camera there. We've got cameras all around. There we go. The Ultimate Franchising Success Formula. Good morning, Jan. How are you going?
Good morning, Glenn. Good.
How are you?
Good, thanks.
You were around yesterday and saw a few episodes?
Yes, I did.
Sitting in the crowd there?
Yeah, it was
supporting.
really good.
So you have written this book. I'll show it again a few times, so make sure you got it.
Yes.
I think it's the Ultimate Franchising Success Formula, but it's also the thickest book on franchising.
It probably is too, yeah. At some point in the future, I might break it down into individual volumes, so it's not so daunting. But anyway, that's how it came out.
That's right. We'll do that. We'll do a video series on it or something. Eh? So what was the rationale and what was the reasoning behind creating the Franchising Success Formula?
Well, I guess I've worked in franchising for around about 25 years. I've worked for some of the major franchise brands. Snap Printing was where I started out my life in franchising. I then opened up Get Smart Services back in 2011, and I've worked with a lot of different franchising clients. And we noticed that there's some common issues that sort of seem to be fairly widespread.
Kept popping up all the time.
I'm an active member of the FCA. You talk to franchisors all the time. Why is it so difficult to get our franchisee partners to participate and engage and, more importantly, take action on these great initiatives that we keep launching? And
so you sense that as a franchisor, you were seeing it, and there was just the traction and the engagement.
There was
wasn't
just
there.
frustration.
Yep.
It was just frustration, and I decided to do a PhD research study.
That's a big call to jump from franchise land into academia. What was that?
I did it part-time. I didn't do it full-time. But so I started that in 2013, and it was basically looking into franchising success factors. So what is it that makes the successful brands more successful than the, let's say, ordinary, the ordinary performers or the lower performers?
So essentially looking for that best practice. Yeah. Sort of focusing on that. So
that was exactly it. What emerged from that was a best practice model in franchising. So it was quite a long, because it was part-time, it went over 7 years. It involved hundreds of interviews. It involved some really in-depth case studies with a number of franchise groups. And the model that emerged from that was very, very recognised in academic terms. In fact, I kept getting invited to go and present at the International Society of
conferences
and things, which was all expense paid trips to Ecuador.
Did you take it up?
Yeah, absolutely.
What was that like? What were those like?
Vienna, we went to Ecuador and Atlanta, Georgia. So 3 years, yeah. So, and regularly cited in academic journals and things. And I just thought, this is ridiculous.
But at that time, you didn't have a book. It wasn't a book.
No, it was a thesis. Well, it was a series of published journal articles, which then came together as a thesis at the end when I graduated. So I graduated in 2019. No graduation ceremony because of COVID, thank you.
Oh, that's right.
7 years of doing
all that hard labour. Don't they backdate it and do it?
They sent it in the mail.
Oh, nice. Congratulations anyway. Well, congratulations from us.
So anyway, I decided that it was just too good a message to leave in academic land hidden. So I decided to write it as a book. And so that was...
So how did you go about getting it into a book? So I suppose this podcast isn't too much about that, but I'm interested in that story, and maybe other people who have done work similar. How did you take the step from getting in a thesis, a massive thesis, and everyone judging it and getting sight in there, and then getting into a published format?
I don't know, really. I just started writing.
I don't know. But so, the writing is probably the easy part. For most people who are able to write, that's the easy part. And I've written books and stuff like that. But actually going through the process of getting it into print, into book, getting distributed, how did you do that?
Well, I actually joined a course on self-publishing, which was an online course, and I had a coach, and they basically went through the mechanisms of, because I was really surprised when I finished the book, that was probably only about 3/4 of the job done.
Yeah, yep.
It then needed to be edited, it needed to be formatted, the proofreading, the editing, the formatting and everything else. Probably took another 6 months or more to get it to the point of it being published. Yeah.
So what was the transition of, did you have to morph it much from your PhD format into a usable format now? So how have you turned it into a practical, usable format? Because I suppose one criticism of academia is that it's very academic.
Yes.
Which is stating the obvious. But how did you then get it into a practical format?
Well, there was a model that emerged from the research, and that is what I call the formula now.
Yes.
So it's basically 5 essential elements for success in franchising. What we discovered in the research is that there are some silent killers that lurk around in every franchise system. Ended up as 12 silent killers, but so
and those silent killers, where your formula is the antidote to those.
Is the sort of the antidote, So the real difference between the most successful franchise brands and those in the lower performing range was their ability to identify and control and prevent, to a certain extent, those silent killers from holding back success and causing harm. So what was it that they did that was different that enabled them to do that? And that was the model that emerged. So the formula is based on that same model, and it's the 5 essential elements for success.
And that first essential element is number 1, because we've talked about this, is getting the right people. So getting the right team.
Absolutely.
Can you go into a bit of detail? So we've got 5 elements to success, and that's what the book is all around. So what's that first one, getting the right people about?
You've got to have the right people. I mean, often people say, look, our most valuable asset is our people.
Everyone says that.
It's not. It's the right people. You can have a whole
semantics, but very true, isn't it?
Yeah, you can have a whole system of wrong people that and it's not kind of working, or people that just don't really fit. So really making sure that you've got the right people on board is absolutely critical. I don't know whether you've familiar. Well, I'm sure you're familiar with Jim Collins, but good to great. And that was one of his key fundamental messages: is you've got to have the right people on board. Get the wrong people off the bus, he said, and get the right people on. And that is so true.
And do you go through elements in that about how you identify those people and how that works, and through your experience in franchising?
Yeah. So there's about 5 or 6 chapters in every element. Which is why the book's so big.
So fat. That's why it's so fat. Yeah.
That's why it's so fat. So, and that part could actually be a book in its own right, as I said. So there's processes there for identifying the success behaviours that your most successful franchise partners have, that maybe the lower performing range doesn't have. Classic research. Again, is the model. So, and what are the things that are different? And those are the behaviours that we really want to look out for when we're recruiting franchisee partners. But it wasn't just franchisee partners getting the right franchisee partners on board. You've got to have the right people in the franchisor team. You've got to have the right people employed by your franchisee partners if it's if it's that kind of model. You've got to have the right suppliers. You've actually got to have the right customers. So it's every player in that franchising relationship.
So it's like a link in the chain, isn't it?
So your supplier partners are critical.
And you're right. I mean, I'm a supplier partner for many brands, and I have some great relationships with many brands. But there's also the odd brand that I think, wow, you don't manage that very well. That they don't treat and I hear from other suppliers that franchisors treating suppliers really poorly with a lack of respect. And they don't realise, I think, how much everyone chats and how much it can get around and how much it impacts at some point, maybe an unseen impact.
Yeah, and look, that your supply partners can help so much as well. If you work together with them and work strategically with them,
absolutely.
Then, together collectively we have synergy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, that's a real key ingredient. So, in the book I go through methods of identifying those key behaviours and then how to go about behavioural interviewing. It's a real kind of how-to book. You could write the model in a couple of pages. Yeah. And it wouldn't end up as a book that big.
So do that. But now we need to show you how to do it.
How do you actually do it?
So, and the next step in the 5 was knowledge management.
Absolutely.
So what do you mean by knowledge management as a statement?
Such a vast amount of knowledge that exists within most established franchise systems. There's such a vast amount of knowledge or know-how that exists in the franchising sector. So what we need to do is to capture that knowledge, and just to use one single academic term maybe, but tacit knowledge. So tacit knowledge is the kind of knowledge that exists in people's heads. They know how to do things themselves, but they don't necessarily know how to explain that to somebody else, and even how to teach somebody else how to do it. But they just do it intuitively, and
it's not documented,
it's not documented, so it gets lost. So you get this brain drain when people leave, and the knowledge walks out with them. And, so actually having an insatiable thirst for finding all of the know-how that exists within your franchise system, within other franchise systems, and bringing that together.
Yeah.
So again,
that's become easier, hasn't it, with technology?
It has
so
certainly.
knowledge management, you sort of need to capture it, because it used to be, I remember the old days, I wrote operations manuals for franchise brands.
Yes.
And everything was in that folder. That was it.
It was in the
That was
folder.
the
and
system.
Updates used to go out in memo envelopes before we had emails. And then we started bombarding them with email and then never went anywhere.
And no one opens any of them and no one's checked them. And
Yeah, so, so actually getting that part of it right. I know some franchise systems that have invested in really fancy knowledge management systems, but it's still not got up-to-date information in it.
Yeah, do you think people just rely too much on technology and think that's going to be the answer to everything?
Yeah.
I see it all the time. They think, we've invested these hundreds of $1,000s in this wonderful system.
Yeah.
And then people don't log in. And we've built stuff for people before, for franchise brands, and we look back and say, he hasn't even logged into it.
No. So you've got to bring it to life. You've got to make it a living knowledge bank of, and it's used the go-to place for absolutely everything. No more emails. Put the emails on what you want to say in emails on the news page, and maybe send out a message, an SMS or an email if you must, but to say there's something there, but don't tell them, give them the detail.
Something that's more engaging.
Yeah. So something that actually gets them interactive. Have it open up when they fire up their computers in the morning. It's the first thing they see. And, sort of really bring it to life and make that so that it's just an integral part of it. And then make sure that the knowledge in it is up to date, relevant and useful.
Yep.
And you're always on the lookout for that. I share a technique, knowledge sharing moments, I call it. I mean, health and safety, they do safety shares. So it's a kind of similar thing. At the beginning of every meeting, let's have a knowledge sharing moment. What's something that you found out that you can share with the rest of the people?
And that can feed into that whole knowledge base.
And, that's a great way of gathering and then collecting it. But you have to take responsibility for making sure that knowledge gets actually
added to it.
Codified and put into the knowledge management system. And then it works.
Then it moves. So the next one of the third of the 5 part of the systems was culture communication systems.
Yes.
So that was the third step in the franchising success formula. What do you mean by that? What does it look like?
Having a healthy culture. And that is, again, one of the silent killers is not understanding that that relationship, that franchisor interdependent relationship. The franchisee isn't dependent on the franchisor. The franchisor isn't dependent on the franchisee. There's an interdependency there. Yeah. And you find somebody maybe comes from the corporate world and they step into the CEO's position and they don't really understand the nature of franchising. And they think, we're just going to tell them what to do like you do with employees and they'll do it. Well, they won't.
Yeah.
They don't.
It's like I'm ex-army, so it's like an army person coming out into a normal workplace and just, why don't they do what I ask them to tell them to do?
The old-fashioned command and control method of management. Yeah. So you've actually got to get the culture so that it works in an interdependent relationship. Yep. You need collaborative communication. It's you need to be structured in an organic way. So it's sort of moving away from that hierarchy.
This seems like the hardest one to achieve in many ways to me, because I haven't come across a franchise brand yet that says they don't have a great culture. Everyone tells me they've got an awesome culture. And so how do you do that? Like what are some of the how-tos of building great culture?
Deliberately building trust credits. Talk about credits and debits. I think that one came from the 7 Habits, but that it's like a trust bank account. So actively going around about building trust credits so that you become trustworthy. That's a really you're worthy of their trust.
Do what you say.
Yeah, do what you say, or with, being open and having that collaborative communication. So there's a whole heap of stages in there. Again, the structure, the way that you're structured. Don't sit in your ivory tower as a CEO.
That would never happen.
Get out there and work in a franchise. Yeah, some of the most successful franchise groups that I spoke to, they actually go out there, and that's the CEOs, CFOs, and COOs, as well as field support or whatever, and they work. They don't just sit there on their laptop doing their own work and, okay, I'm here on in a visit.
And I think you're right. I think there's I won't say the brand because I'm not vouching for any particular brand, but there's a brand that we've started doing some work for that really caught my attention when very early in speaking to them. They said one of our key things we have when they talked about their culture is all of their head office team have to go and work in store. Yeah. And they work in store regularly. It's not like a one-off and you come and do one or 2 days when you start. No. They're on regular cycles to go and do some time in store, so they remain in touch. 2-3
times a year was was kind of common, and not the same store, and they have to be chosen randomly. So you can't just choose your favourite. And if it's field support, they need to go into somebody else's territory, not their own.
Not their own comfort zone.
Their own comfort zone, yeah. So that was a really important thing as well, and earned a lot of respect, but also gathered a lot of know-how. So
add to the knowledge base.
Yeah, that was an important one. And then with the communication's tough, but we have to communicate in ways other than shooting emails, as I mentioned before, with the knowledge system and having a news news feature,
bulletin board type of thing.
Yeah, in that, having chats, but getting what we call rich communication methods. So rich communication is more engaging. So send a video. You'd like that?
I love that. Yeah, we'll do it for you.
Shoot a video and make that the message. Oh, they can do it themselves.
Yeah.
I mean,
no one can do it themselves. We have to do all of it.
You have to do it for them. Absolutely. It's So because you've got and use Teams. Don't use the phone.
Of course.
Don't use emails. Pick up the phone and speak to someone, but don't use phones. Actually go onto Teams and then they can see you.
Face to face. It's as face to face as you can be.
Yeah, it's far richer as a communication method to be face to face than than any of the other methods.
Yeah, you're right. There's so many tools we can use by just putting in that little bit more effort, other than a thumbs up on a text message or something like that.
Yeah,
I've been told thumbs up is no good. Apparently, thumbs up is no good anymore. But anyway,
isn't it? Oh,
no,
dear, I still do that.
I just do that too. I've been caught out on it. The fourth one was in the franchising success formula. It's a mouthful to say fast. Is field support. So building field support. So what are the ones we've gone now? We've gone. I'm looking at my notes here. Getting the right people, knowledge management, and culture and communication systems.
Yep.
And now we move into field support.
Absolutely. And field support. I mean, I think the field support managers is probably the most critical role in franchising. It's probably
the coalface, aren't they?
The coalface. It's a tough role, but it's not always done well. So structured field support, and it's not one size that fits all. So again, taking those behaviours that were identified in element 1, the success behaviours, which you're going to use to get the right people on board, you can always also use those to create a systemised field support method that will then identify which of those behaviours we need to be working on, and that's what you're working on with this franchisee. It might be a different one with somebody else, and so on. So yeah, it's that sort of structured field support. I draw quite heavily on a lot of Greg Nathan's work, and I know you've got him on.
He's up next.
He's up next. I think he is. Yeah.
He's in the
But
audience.
the franchisee factor, what stage are they at in the franchisee factor? Because the way that you provide support needs to be different depending on where they're at. What are the things that they need to be function? That they need to be working on to actually improve their business. It's not the same as the person in the neighbouring territory necessarily.
Yeah, so it's like, what's the agenda for that visit?
Yeah.
Isn't it? So I can imagine that field support traditionally would go into it. This is what I want to achieve on this visit, rather than saying, what does the franchise owner want to achieve on this visit?
So some of the how-tos there are identifying the time wasters, putting together a system. I call it a 5-star business boost system because there's, but it could be 6-star, it could be 7-star, but the things that you're actually working on that you've identified as being those key success factors within your franchise system, and then making field support tailored to that, keeping them accountable for what they say they're going to do. Don't just go in, make a friendship call and have a talk fest.
Sit down, have a coffee, and then
sit down, have a coffee. How's the family? There's a certain amount of human interaction, but it's a business meeting and it needs to have business outcomes that we're then held accountable for. And that's what I mean. I suppose what I mean by structured field support. All around
the franchisee's needs. And the fifth and final one in the franchising success formula is learning and development.
Absolutely.
And I think that certainly builds on that previous one, because field support, we had Peter Knight in here yesterday, the franchise accountant, talking about profitability and identifying profitability, or the numbers for a franchise someone's purchasing. And he has raised some concerns about the ability or knowledge of recruitment and field staff in the financial aspects of businesses. And I suppose this rolls onto that, doesn't it, with learning and development, making sure everyone is in a place where they can actually add value. Absolutely.
And look, too often we do our induction training and we call it training and that's it. And it's, it's done. Well, tick the box. We've done the right thing. But learning is an ongoing process. I don't like calling it training, because training is what I do to you. Learning is what you learn from me.
Yeah.
So training without learning is a waste of time, but more importantly, learning without transfer to on-the-job behaviour and action is a complete waste of money and time as well. So we've got to make sure that we've got a very effective, in the book I call it a learning transfer station. That's sort of...
you come up with your terms. So we all come up with cool terms.
So it's really important that we get that happening. I also believe that learning and development is part of the field support team. I think they should be in the same, so if they're reporting into the operations, but that they're all part of the same team. Just they focus on delivering things in a slightly different way. But the ingredient or the key ingredients for learning transfer that I sort of go through in that fifth element, I call it a Wickham. So here I am with my acronyms again.
There you go again, yeah.
But, a Wickham method of learning and development, which stands for, it's got to be, first of all, worthwhile. So it's got to be useful, relevant, worthwhile. So that's the W. The I is the interactive, engaging. You can't just sit there and passively watch a 40-minute webinar and think and call that learning.
Yep.
You call it training if you want, but learning, it doesn't happen as a result of it. So you've got to make sure that what you're creating has got interaction and engagement in it. The C is for convenience. So you've got to be able to tackle it in bite-sized chunks, in an Uber on the way to a meeting, or on a train, or while you're waiting for an appointment or a meeting or something like that you can do bites of it. It's there, it's on your
chunks of it,
your devices. So the convenience. K is for knowledge transfer, and we talked about that. But unless knowledge is transferred to on the job behaviour, it's a waste of time. But then we have assessment. So the A is for assessment, and that by assessment, have we had lasting knowledge transfer? Are they still using the same behaviours that we checked that they were using previously, immediately afterwards, 12 months down the track? Or have they slipped back into bad habits again? So just making sure that's... And then the M is measurement.
I was thinking, when you said it earlier, I was going, Wickham. I was going through them. Measurement. Okay, so measuring the success of them.
How successful was it in terms of return on investment and the effort that we put into it? And if we've got lasting behaviour change, then it's probably... most likely will result in better business results, because why else would we have done the learning program in the first place? We're not into... teaching them to do things that aren't going to make them more successful.
So in wrapping it up and summarising then, a franchisor watching this, or if a franchisee watching this, reading it, or potential looking at this, how does this book get used, or how do you advise people to use it best in their businesses and in their franchise networks? What's their approach?
Well, the first part actually goes through a process of setting priorities. It's not a linear book.
Yep.
So it's not something that I would expect somebody to read from start to finish. It's something you say, well, our priority at the moment is this. This is where we've got some weaknesses that we want to make our number one priority, our number two priority, and go and focus on that. I also think it's far better if the whole franchisor team, maybe the management team, but also if it's a big franchisor group and there's teams beneath that as well, should actually be working on the elements concurrently, so that we're all kind of working on the same page.
Yeah, you're all going the same direction.
One of the number one key critical success factor in franchising is the franchisor's ability to develop and replicate successful franchisee partners. That's what franchising is all about. It's what drives the economic engine. Yep. Well, that should be the unifying vision of every single member of the franchisor team, and the litmus test for strategic decisions. So is this now, Brian Keane called it being franchise-centric, but is this decision going to actually achieve better outcomes? Or is it a decision that we as a franchisor have got ambitions to do, but it really isn't going to make a lot of difference. And that's what should drive the decision-making process. So, that's kind of really, really critical. So getting that message across in the first place so that everybody's focused on that, and then identifying the priorities and working on them and coming together.
Ticking them off as you go.
Yeah. So I have put together an e-learning and coaching program, and I do work with some franchisors to help them with that and, coach them. That we work on their own unique priorities at their own pace. Yep. And I'm just there to coach, support.
Sure.
Offer my words of wisdom,
years of knowledge,
and keeping them accountable for the actions that they say they're going to do as well, which also they say
Excellent.
helps. So, that's sort of really
That's the use of
approach.
it. And we'll put those links in the show notes and everything for this. This is the reach over and grab it up again. This is the book, The Ultimate Franchising Success Formula by Jan Timms. Asanka's there taking photos, so I'll make sure we get a photo of that. Jan, thanks so much for joining us today. Much appreciated.
Thank you for inviting me.
Tell us a story about your book. That's it for another episode of the Franchise Everything podcast. I hope you liked this and enjoyed it. Please share, subscribe, do all that sort of stuff in all the places where you listen and watch this sort of thing. And look around, tell everyone about it. Make sure we help people in the marketplace just create better and more profitable businesses so we can all live more fulfilling and happy lives. So we'll catch you again in the next one soon.